The keepers. What if the people we think control history never actually controlled it? What if kings were only instruments? What if emperors were only pieces on a board? What if governments, dynasties, secret societies, and religious institutions were not the top of the pyramid, but merely the visible layer? There is an old idea that behind every great historical event there is a hidden hand. But the story we are about to enter goes much further. It says that behind those hidden hands stands an organization that has existed for thousands of years. An organization so small that almost nobody could know it exists. An organization that never needs to appear publicly. Because its greatest weapon is not an army, it is influence. They are the keepers. And they are not simply trying to rule humanity. They are waiting for someone who disappeared thousands of years ago. Someone who can bring an ancient civilization back to life. His name was El, and before we reach him, we have to go back to the beginning, to an age when humanity had already reached a level of science and technology far beyond our own, an age when civilization stood before an enormous catastrophe. The people of that world understood that something was coming. They faced a choice: remain divided or unite, continue fighting, or create a new civilization. And so they created Eden, an ideal civilization, a perfect world, a place where chaos would be replaced by order. But there was a problem. How do you move an entire civilization from chaos into perfection? Someone had to control the transition, someone had to stabilize the system, and the people chose the best among them, a man named El. At first, El was not a tyrant. He was chosen because he was considered one of the best. He served the people, he brought order, and for a time it worked. But El possessed something extraordinary, something later civilizations would remember only as an attribute of gods: the Vajra. The Vajra was not merely a symbol, it was technology, a device, a weapon, something so advanced that later civilizations could only interpret it as supernatural. It was the most powerful weapon of that civilization, and there was something especially dangerous about it. It could be used for good or for destruction. El had access to that power, and then came the moment that changed everything. El believed he had been treated unjustly. He became angry, and instead of remaining the servant of humanity, he used the Vajra for himself. That single decision became the turning point. The protector became the ruler became a tyrant, and the tyrant became a god. El proclaimed himself supreme, his children became gods as well, and the world that had been created as an Eden began to transform into something completely different. El divided territories among his sons. Each son was placed over a different people, but administration soon became competition. The sons fought one another, not merely with armies, with technology, with weapons, with knowledge. Their wars became increasingly destructive, and then the competition moved into something even more dangerous: biology. Genetic experimentation began. Each son attempted to create populations possessing advantages over the others, different abilities, different physical characteristics, different levels of intelligence, different forms of humanity. This is where the legends of giants and other unusual beings enter the story. Humanity itself had become an experiment. The sons of El were no longer simply ruling people, they were attempting to redesign them. Among all of El's children, one was considered particularly intelligent, the youngest, Yahweh. Yahweh approached the problem differently. Instead of relying only on human genetics, he used genetic material from beings considered biologically superior. The result was a new population, a people with extraordinary intellectual abilities, and the youngest son became one of the most dangerous figures in the entire system. But the civilization was already approaching its end. The world of El was destroyed. The great civilization collapsed. Its cities disappeared. Its knowledge was buried. Its people vanished. But not everyone died. El had maintained a private inner circle: his generals, his advisors, his closest servants, his personal guard. A small group that knew everything, controlled everything. Even El's own children were beneath them. Only El stood above them. They were the keepers. There were 12. 4 of them were always closest to El, and El himself was the 13th, 12 around 1. The number 13 would become one of the most important patterns in this entire story. The keepers were considered immortal. They could live for more than 1,000 years. Their lifespans were so extraordinary that later generations remembered them as gods. But then came the final catastrophe. El was defeated. 4 of the 12 keepers died with him. The remaining 8 were forced underground, and there they created something extraordinary. Asgarda, an underground civilization, a hidden world beneath the surface of the earth, a world of knowledge, a world of technology, a world that had supposedly preserved the secrets of the previous civilization. The 8 survivors became the 8 immortals, and they were not alone. There was another civilization, another hidden world, Shambala. Shambala and Asgarda were opposites, light and darkness, 2 forces, 2 directions, 2 civilizations. Shambala represented light, Asgarda represented darkness. The conflict between them was ancient, and Shambala had already defeated the followers of El once. It had driven them underground. But the 8 immortals had one final problem. They possessed Amrita, the drink of the gods, an elixir that could extend life. But eventually the supply ran out, and the knowledge required to create it was lost. The immortals could no longer continue living normally. So they entered Samadhi, a state between life and death. Their bodies remained. Their consciousness became inactive. They stopped aging. They became something similar to human beings placed into suspended animation, like astronauts entering an artificial sleep before a journey lasting centuries. They did not die. They simply stopped, and they began waiting. Waiting beneath the earth, waiting in the caves of Tibet, waiting for their master, waiting for El to return. But while the immortals slept, their followers remained above ground. These followers became known as the great architects of the world. Architectons. Their purpose was to protect the ancient knowledge, to guard the sleeping immortals, and eventually, to prepare humanity for the return of their master. The architectons returned to the surface. They entered human civilization. They appeared among the earliest civilizations. They influenced rulers, priests, religions, institutions. And gradually, the ancient hidden system became part of human history. The people could see kings, they could see priests, they could see armies, but they could not see the people behind them.